Hello and welcome to Helsinki Airport, where today we are bringing our Women in Aviation campaign, and we are going to meet a professional who is working on the A350 at Finnair. Sara Mosebar has been working with aviation for many years. She used to work at Boeing on the 777 and the 787. An engineer by background, she is now the A350 Program Manager here at Finnair, and we are delighted to have the opportunity to speak to her today. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Your whole career has been focused on aviation, and you've worked with some of the biggest names in aviation. So, tell us, what was your journey into this sector?
Richard, I grew up in Texas, in the West Texas town of El Paso, and I used to watch airplanes just fly across the big blue skies. And I thought, how do they stay up there? How does something so large and so massive stay up in the sky? And I didn't know any engineers at the time, and Google didn't really exist. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go to school and figure that out. And so quite early on, I decided I wanted to go into aerospace engineering, even though I barely knew what that was at the time.
So, it really was a childhood dream, which I guess, looking back on your career already, you've kind of succeeded that childhood dream.
You can never succeed at a dream, you just make new ones. But yes, I'm very thrilled with where my career has taken me. I've gotten to be part of very interesting projects over the years, the entry into service of the A350, for instance. Finnair was the first European operator of the A350. We were only the third operator in the world. So it's very rare that in your career, especially when it's still as young as mine, you get to really be part of something that important for the history of aviation. So it's been a phenomenal journey.
So we are obviously going to dig into the whole A350 side of things because speaking to your chief executive recently, he admitted to me on camera that the A350 is in fact his favorite aircraft. So I'm sure there is no pressure here whatsoever. But just tell us, what exactly does an A350 program manager do? What's the day-to-day role for you?
A350 Program Manager basically means that you are responsible from the day the aircraft is going to be born to the day it leaves your company. You need to look out for it through its entire life cycle. You're worried about, from a technical perspective, how are things performing? How are we going to, as an airline, use this product? How are we going to serve our customers with this product? On the technical side, it's very much understanding the aircraft and understanding what problems it has and how can we, as an airline, adapt to that aircraft, especially when it was so early in the program. There were a lot of teething problems, a lot of infant issues that we had to learn very quickly how to work with. But I can say that my A350s are my babies. I know each and every one of them, and I have gotten to take delivery of at least half of the fleet in my current role, which is also a privilege when you see an aircraft brand new, no one has experienced it yet, and you with your team are the last check to make sure that it's ready for the airline.
So you talk about the fleet. You already have 17 A350s, and there are two more on order, I understand. So when are you planning to introduce those new two aircraft to the fleet?
Currently, the schedule is for those to deliver in the end of 2024 and first quarter of 2025.
And in terms of the A350s then that you have already, you talk about teething problems. I'm sure that doesn't surprise anyone. Whenever you introduce anything new to a business, you're going to have to deal with that. But overall, I'm assuming that Finnair is very happy with the performance of the A350s.
Again, entry into service for any new aircraft is a challenge from a technical perspective. The manufacturers are trying to introduce new features and new technologies. So teething problems are natural. What I will say is that Airbus has been incredibly supportive over the last 7 years. They've worked hard with us and the airlines, and the A350 community as a whole has really worked together to try to make this the best airplane that it can be. And I would say now, 7 years after entry into service, it's a great airplane. It's very reliable. Our customers love it. And it's the foundation of our expansion that we've had in Finnair and these prior to COVID.
So how do you feel about the new production standards on the A350 and the widening of the cabin?
I mean, who doesn't want more space on board an airplane? I think it's great that the manufacturer is really taking into consideration the needs of the end user, the passengers, and the airline. I think it makes everyone's experience better on board. So, all for it.
And recently, you have introduced a new cabin in business class,
We have.
a brand new seat, brand new concept. I was very lucky that I got to fly on this earlier this week. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, so thank you very much for that. But how did that all happen? What was your role in that? How do you introduce a new cabin like that to business class, and especially when it's such a bold innovation in terms of the seat design? I mean, that it takes some guts to do that.
I must say, I love it too. I think it's a completely new idea of what a business class experience can be. You can really get comfortable and kind of get cozy and nestle into the seat, and there's no constraints. It's almost like you're sitting at home on your couch. And that was the idea, right? That you want to have a little bit of home while you're traveling. I think our design team did an amazing execution on exactly that. I got to be the one who took final delivery of that first cabin. So, and I'm now responsible for the maintenance of the cabin. And I've got to say, it's just a joy, honestly. We've gotten great feedback from our customers. We see consistently on the routes where we're operating that aircraft that the customer response is improved. Almost 20%, I would say, in terms of Net Promoter Score. So we're quite happy, and we're happy that our customers are happy. So I can't wait till it gets rolled out across our fleet, which should be, I believe, around the beginning of 2024.
So I'll be very honest with you. I will tell you that I was slightly skeptical when I got on board the aircraft, slightly, and I sat down and I thought, okay, and then you know what? I loved it. I mean, I really did. The amount of space that you have is incredible. But I have read there are a few people who didn't like it quite so much.
Yeah.
But you always have to expect that. But actually, as you say, the scores of your customers are very positive, and the feedback you're getting is very positive. So, but what would you say to those people who haven't tried it yet, who are a little bit skeptical, but they're not willing to take the plunge? What's your message to those people? Like, come and try it, right?
Yes, my message to people who have not tried our new Air Lounge concept is experience it with an open mind. It's not a business class seat the way you would think about it. We wanted to reduce the amount of actuators on board. We wanted to remove the amount of buttons that you have to touch. We really just want you to be comfortable in your experience. Again, in the same way when you're sitting at home, your couch, you don't have to fiddle with anything. You just sit your pillow, get comfortable, and settle in for your nice flight.
So let's hope that we can persuade some more people to do that and to try it. I mean, as I say, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I will definitely be using it again. Being the program manager for the A350 at a major airline, a flag-carrying airline, is a huge responsibility. You know, and the A350, it's a growing fleet. Clearly, Finnair is focusing an awful lot of its future strategy on the A350. So, you know, again, no pressure, but I mean, how do you feel about that and being that leader for such an iconic and important part of the airline's future?
It's a privilege. It honestly is, especially because it is a new product. Everyone is so excited about it. But more than anything, everyone in Finnair is very passionate about what we do, even more so with a new product. But in general, the team that I work with supports me every day. I couldn't do my job without them. And everyone is quite passionate. My biggest concern is often that they're working too hard and too much and monitoring the fleet when they're at home at night, when they should be with their families. And so I think it's a privilege to get to work, to come to work every day with those types of people, and to help lead them and the fleet forward.
So the A350 is clearly it's a special aircraft. I mean, everyone I've spoken to here in Helsinki, you know, loves the A350. But what is it about the A350 that's particularly special for you? What are those magic qualities of the A350 that get you excited every time you come to work?
The A350s, like I said, they're my babies. I joined Finnair specifically to work with the A350s. I started 3 months before the first A350 arrived. I still remember when Whiskey Alpha, the MSN 18, the 18th aircraft off the line, arrived here in Helsinki, and taking care of them every day and just being excited every time one landed. So for me, it's been a long relationship now that I've had with the fleet, and I've crawled in and out of all sorts of parts of these aircraft in the avionics compartments. When you do an aircraft delivery, you inspect every single little detail on an aircraft, and so when you're that close to them, um, it's just a special feeling whenever you see one of them.
So sustainability is a very important issue as well. And every time I speak to somebody at Finnair, I hear about how it's very much at the core of everything that you do and very much a core part of the strategy for the future. But what does it mean to you, and how does your team go about implementing sustainable, friendly policies for the future?
For us, sustainability in day-to-day work means trying to reduce weight on board, trying to reduce the amount of fuel burns from, let's say you have an open defect where you're burning excess fuel. How can we minimize the amount of time that's open? How can we operate more efficiently? How can we carry less water on board to optimize that? So it's all about making tiny little changes in our day-to-day operations in everything that we do to try to be more sustainable.
And do you think that the aviation industry as a whole is doing enough to promote sustainability?
I think the Earth is in crisis, and there's no such thing as enough. We are doing a lot. We are investing in sustainable aviation fuels. We're, as an industry, trying to develop new technologies, electric aircraft, alternative fuel sources. We're doing a lot. But again, there's no such thing as enough. We can always do more. And I think that's one of the things that we try to challenge ourselves at Finnair, is asking ourselves, what more can we do? And we also want to challenge our customers at the same time to ask themselves, what more can they do? Pack less, be more considerate of your fuel offsetting options as well. So I think it's up to everyone to ask ourselves, what more can I do to be more sustainable?
And do you think that your passengers are doing enough yet? Do you think passengers around the world are doing enough yet? And again, you say, there's never enough. The planet is in crisis. But, I'm going to fly back to London later on today. What could I do on my flight later on that will just, make me feel better that I actually contributed to this effort today?
Well, again, there are a couple of things that passengers can directly do. One is carry less stuff on board. For every kilo that you take on board an aircraft, it's burning additional aviation fuel, and that's contributing to CO2 emissions. Also, we do have options to offset those emissions directly. So the reality is that aviation is in the future. We want to connect globally. We want to understand and see other cultures, and I think that sort of exchange is really important. I live abroad from my family, so if we want to stay connected with our families and friends, the future of aviation is strong, and so it's just a matter of doing it responsibly.
So you mentioned this is the 100-year anniversary this year for Finnair, and that's a huge milestone. So are there any special roles for the A350 in marking that huge centenary?
100 years is not a given for any airline, especially considering the last few years that we've had COVID, the Ukraine war situation. So quite frankly, we're happy to be able to continue to have the A350 as our flagship fleet, to continue to connect our passengers between Asia and Europe, Middle East, and Americas as well. So it's just going to keep doing what it's been doing, and it's doing it very well.
And when you think about when you think, from your personal point of view, when you think about 100 years is a huge milestone. And then you think about the next 100 years. And just in the area that you're responsible for, there's huge opportunity and potential for the future. So, how do you see the next 100 years developing for Finnair?
I'm focused on what we're going to do in the next few years and where we can take our airline from technical perspective. We have so much data now. These aircraft produce thousands of data points, and we're barely starting to skim the surface of what we can do with that in terms of predictive maintenance, and actually, instead of reacting when something fails, saying, we know that this pump is going to fail in 10 flight cycles, and being able to avoid delays for our customers and really understanding the aircraft side of things. So that's my focus. That's my dream. I want us to start digging into what's going on in these aircraft so we can better understand them.
Perfect. So you have had a really interesting career already. And I know that, especially through the work we've done in relation to our Women in Aviation campaign, that there'll be a lot of people that will look up to you very much as a role model to show the opportunities that really exist for women in the aviation sector. So, what would your message be to your younger self, or what would your message be to women and girls who are thinking about a career in the aviation sector?
I would say that airplanes are cool. I literally get paid to come to work every day and learn more about airplanes. I've been in aviation for 13 years now, and I learn something new literally every day. And I can't imagine doing anything else. There's always something new, something different. You get to work with people around you who are also just incredibly passionate about what we're doing. So there's an energy of community, of belonging, because we're all dedicated to this one idea, which is aircraft, airline, aviation. So it's a really special place to be, and you get something new every day. So.
And there are some parts of the world where we don't really need to talk about women in aviation, because actually the whole gender equality side of things is actually far more advanced than in some other parts of the world. But as an industry as a whole, is there anything you think that aviation could do more of to try and promote and encourage the next generation of women to come into our industry?
The previous generation did a lot such that I can be sitting here with you today having this conversation, but the job's not done. We still have a long way to go. There are still a lot of challenges for women in aviation, especially on the technical side. But the fact is that whenever I've had a challenge, I've also had an ally with me. I've had someone who recognized my achievements and my contributions. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge as well, is that we need people to advocate an ally for women in our industry, because there aren't enough of us in the industry, which is the other problem. I was just looking at my university statistics, and only 15% of aerospace engineering graduates are female. And that's a problem. If there aren't women available, then we're not going to be able to promote women into positions of management, into higher positions, such that we can start making real impacts. So we need to start encouraging young girls early on, not just engineering in general. But for instance, I went to space camp when I was younger and learned how rockets work and that sort of thing. So we really need to start this outreach when girls are young and encourage them to take things apart and learn how things work. And if you want to do engineering, it's not when you go to university, it's very early on. Parents might not appreciate their kids taking apart TVs or laptops, but that's what young engineers do.
So your message to young boys and girls, I'm sure, who are thinking about taking their career in the engineering direction, is to take apart their parents' television and see if they can put it back together again.
Yes.
That's about right. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Sounds great. Sounds great. I love it.
My parents loved me for doing that.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, but it's really about curiosity, about how things work, and just wanting to figure out how things tick.
Yeah, definitely. And now, of course, you have the A350, which ticks on so many different levels. I mean, it's just a complete, for me, somebody who's not an engineer and somebody who doesn't really understand how these things work. But just thinking about, I remember once being told this amazing statistic about the number of miles of cabling and things that there are on an aircraft. And as you said, when you take delivery of these aircraft, you have to inspect every single, nook and cranny and element of those aircraft. So, I mean, to me, it sounds like probably one of the most exciting jobs in aviation.
I think so.
I thought you might. So look, Sarah, I've got two last questions for you. And these are questions we like to ask everybody. So the first one is, if you're allowed to, and I think I know what the answer is, but what is your favorite aircraft?
Yeah, it's got to be the A350.
I thought it might have to be. Yeah, okay, so if we took away the A350 and you had to have a reserve, what would your reserve one be? Because I kind of feel like, given the A350s are your babies, it's kind of, it's a given. So what would be number two?
I started my career with Boeing on the 777 aircraft. So I would say, if not for the A350s, then 777. It's the perfect balance of good technology and also just classic aircraft design. So
Nice, very nice. And my last question to you is: you've had this amazing career already, and I think just reading about you before we got the opportunity to meet today, I just think it's fascinating. So you must have a lot of favorite aviation related experiences, and we could probably talk about this for the next few hours. But if you had to pick one, what has been your favorite aviation experience so far?
taking delivery of an A350. I mean, it's something you only get to do once in your career, and I've been lucky enough to do it 7 times. But there's nothing like flying back on a completely empty A350 with just you and your team. I'm not going to tell you all the secrets, but sometimes we have music playing and we're dancing around, and it's just such a relief because it's such an intense process. Like you said, we're climbing around, we inspect everything, we check every system. It's 2 weeks of really intense work. And so when it's done, it's just such a relief and it's yours.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining AeroTime today. Thank you very much for supporting our Women in Aviation campaign. And thank you also for the role that you play as a role model for those next generations that are going to come in behind you. And I really look forward to hearing stories in the future about when you're welcoming those next generations to work behind you. But for today, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with the future.
Thank you, Richard. If I can say one more thing to the future generation, it's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it.